Welcome to the Steel City. Is everybody ready to go? Let's proclaim the greatest radio show.
Welcome, fans, to another great episode of The Spread. I'm your host, Jim Sella, here with Jay Dash. Got some good baseball coverage for you today. We're going to talk about the top 3 rotations in the American League. Before we get into that info, Dash has got a couple honorable mentions. Since you're the baseball CEO, Dash, I'm going to let you take it away.
Yeah, well, first of all, these rotations could change by the time opening day rolls around due to injury or anything else. Who knows? But, yeah, I want to give a couple honorable mentions, and these are all my opinion, obviously. It's hard to do. The American League really doesn't have... Well, I guess you could look at the top 2 teams here and say their rotation's good all around, pretty beast. But really, there's not any team that looks great from 1 through 5. These honorable mentions here, I'm going to go with the Chicago White Sox first. They still got Jose Quintana after getting rid of Chris Sale. He moves into the number 1 starter spot now. Now, they have Miguel Gonzalez behind him. He's always been a solid starting pitcher. I don't know if he's a number 2 or not yet. But they have Carlos Rodon, a young guy that still has some upside ahead of him, and he could definitely step into that number 2 spot this season. James Shields is more named than anything else, but they have him as their number 4 right now. He really doesn't have the numbers he used to have. And they have Derek Holland, who has been a good pitcher in the past, has dealt with some injuries, but he is still a very solid number 5 to start a season with, I would have to believe. And more than anything else, I like what they have in their minor league system, and they have some guys that are close to the majors. They traded for Lucas Giolito this season. They traded Adam Eaton to the Washington Nationals. Giolito coming over, he could actually step into a big role this season at some point. They got a top 25 prospect in Michael Kopech. This is the one guy that you're probably not going to see this season, but they have Ronaldo Lopez they brought over from Washington as well, and Carson Fulmer, who's been in their system and looked like he could be somewhere at least a number 4 or number 5 on this team. So they have a nice future in their rotation, a pretty good minor league system. There's the Seattle Mariners. They have King Felix still at the top of the rotation. Now, he's not the same pitcher he used to be either, but he could come back and have a solid season. Hisashi Iwakuma needs to step up and rebound from last season. He had a down year, but this has been a very good pitcher in the past as well. James Paxton they have. This is a young guy with some upside. I don't know if he's hit his full potential yet. I think he still has a little bit more ahead of him, but I think he could even step into that number 2 role if Iwakuma doesn't have a rebound season. And then they have Yovani Gallardo and Drew Smyly at the back end. So it's not like this rotation's beast or anything, but they have some solid veterans here who have pitched well in the past. And I think that could be a solid team this season, both offensively and defensively. It depends on how a couple guys on their offense work out as well. They got a couple of rookies in there. They're hoping to have good seasons. You got the Tampa Bay Rays. They have Chris Archer at the top of the rotation still. He is an ace. Jake Odorizzi is a guy I always liked as the number 2. He never really fully developed into what I thought he could be, but he's definitely a solid guy you can rely on. Alex Cobb is a guy that can be a good pitcher. He had a injury-filled season last year. They need him to just stay healthy this year, and I think you'll get good numbers out of him. They have Blake Snell, a guy who made his debut last season. They definitely want to see him get better this year, and I think he will. He had some dominant numbers in the minor league. I think he can at least hold down the number 4, number 5 spot in this rotation. And then they have Matt Andrews, a guy I really don't care for, but they do have Jose De Leon they traded for from the Dodgers just recently for Logan Forsythe, that second baseman that the Dodgers were looking for. And they have Brett Honeywell as well. So they have a couple young guys here that are about ready to step into the major leagues. I don't think they're going to be a beast rotation this year, but just like last year, I like the looks of what this rotation is going to be. The Oakland Athletics, they need a rebound season out of Sonny Gray. This guy's an ace, and he had a terrible season last year. It was a lost season for him. So you have to believe he's going to at least come back and have a solid season. Sean Manaea, a guy who had his rookie year last year, looked very good. They're hoping he takes the next step. They got Kendall Graveman, a solid pitcher, still a young guy, but he's never going to be more than a number 3 and number 4. But he's still an okay pitcher. And then there's this Jarrell Cotton, who had a solid something like 10 starts or something at the end of the season last year. I forget what the actual number was, but he looked really good. He had a whip under 1 and an ERA under 3. He's still a young guy, and they actually believe he's going to end up being the second best pitcher on this rotation, behind Sonny Gray. Now, I still like Manea a little bit more. Cotton's a little bit smaller of a guy. I like those big pitchers like Manea, but if Cotton can do what everybody expects him to do, Manea at least perform how he did last season, especially at the end of the season. He was dominating. And if Sonny Gray can bounce back, those are 3 guys I really like. And then you got Andrew Triggs and Jesse Hahn battling out for the number 5 spot. And they have that Frankie Montes in the minor league system, who you'd expect, well, he could turn into a reliever actually, but he could step into the number 5 role if Jesse Hahn or Triggs doesn't work out. You got the Detroit Tigers. They had a pretty solid season last year out of Verlander. He had a big bounce back season. Hopefully he can do the same thing as he did last year. Michael Fulmer was a guy that had a pretty solid rookie season last year. He actually started off very well, kind of cooled off towards the end, but they're hoping for more out of him this season. That's a good 1 and 2. They want to see more out of Jordan Zimmerman. They want to see him pitch like he did in Washington a few years ago. He wasn't as good last season, but you can at least expect number 3 type numbers out of him. And Anibal Sanchez, I don't think he is the same type of pitcher he used to be, but that isn't a terrible number 4 or number 5. And then you have Derek Norris, the guy that lived out of his van when he played for Toronto. He still might live in his van in Detroit. I don't know. Was
his van down by the river?
It was down by the river. That's freezing in Toronto, though.
Believe it.
But, yeah, he's not a terrible pitcher either, and I think he has a little bit more upside ahead of him as well. In the last team here, the Toronto Blue Jays, they had a great season out of J.A. Happ last year. He actually cooled off towards the end, but most expectations are this season, and it's logical that Happ isn't going to be as good this year, but he still should be a solid pitcher for him. Now, he's either the number 1 or number 2 at this point. I think they have Marco Estrada listed as the number 1 right now. He doesn't have ace-type stuff or anything, but he has been a solid pitcher, someone you can rely on throughout the season. And then Aaron Sanchez, still a young guy, had a pretty solid season last year, and they're hoping for more out of him as well. Marcus Stroman was a guy a couple years ago that looked like he was turning into an ace, and he actually had a down season last year for what people expected. But I think that was coming off a missed season as well, if my memory serves me right. But he needs to step back up and perform a little bit better this season as well. But he's a young guy, so hopefully he can do that. But he's also a small guy, and sometimes I really don't believe in those guys long term. So hopefully he can get back on track. I'm not 100% sure he can, but he does have some nasty stuff. And the number 5 is Francisco Liriano. And from what I heard, they changed his arm slot or something, maybe his release point, I think it is actually. And they actually believe he's going to have a bounce back season and play like he did for Pittsburgh, not last year, but the couple years before that. And if he can do that out of the number 5 spot, this rotation isn't looking bad at all. All right, let's get into the last 3 here. And this was tough for me. This is only my opinion, like I was saying. But I'm going to go with the number 3 team as the Texas Rangers, and mostly because they're top-heavy. They got Cole Hamels, who had a 3.32 ERA last season with a 1.31 whip. He pitched 202-point innings, had 200 Ks compared to 77 walks. Now, the walks were a little bit high, but still a pretty dominating season out of him. And anytime you can get 200 innings out of a guy, he had a pretty good season, really, no matter what his ERA is. Yu Darvish is their number 2 at this point. This is a guy they want to get a full season out of, though. He only pitched 100 innings last year, obviously, after having Tommy John surgery and missing the season before. But still, pretty good numbers. A 3.41 ERA and a 1.12 whip last season in 100 innings with 132 Ks and 31 walks. This guy is their best pitcher when fully healthy. And the last three, not dominating players by any means, but Martin Perez did pitch 198.2 innings last season, had a 4.39 ERA, which isn't terrible. Only 103 Ks compared to 76 walks, though. If he can get his walks down a little bit, his ERA should drop. But either way, getting 200 innings out of your number 3 guy isn't terrible. Then Andrew Kashner, a guy who was dominant in the past. In 2014, he had a 2.55 ERA and a 1.13 WHIP. Now, last season with San Diego and Miami, he combined to have a 5.25 ERA, a 1.53 WHIP, and he only pitched 132 innings, had 112 Ks compared to 60 walks. He needs to get those walks down a little bit, but this guy had big time stuff in the past, had to deal with some injuries recently, but I could see him bouncing back and being a solid number 4 this season. And then their 5th guy has had some injury problems as well, and actually only pitched 119 innings last season, had a 5.07 ERA and a 1.36 WHIP. But before that, he actually missed 2 straight seasons. That's A.J. Griffin. Now, the last time he pitched was with the Oakland A's prior to last season with the Rangers, and he was actually a much better pitcher then. Both seasons he pitched with the A's, he had an ERA under 4. So A.J. Griffin, after coming back last season, pitching over 100 innings, hopefully they can get him up to 150 or something like that this season and get that ERA down a little bit, maybe closer to 4. So it's not a dominating staff by any means, but the first 2 pitchers in this staff is what makes it so good.
Gotta have pitching. If you don't have pitching, you don't have nothing. I don't care how many runs you score, you'll just get smashed in the playoffs.
Please believe it. The last 2 teams here, I'm sure most people who follow baseball can figure out who they are by now. The number 2 team I'm going to say is the Cleveland Indians. Now, Cleveland's starting rotation, it's no different than last season, but it is beast. Corey Kluber is the ace on this staff, pitched 215 innings last season, had a 3.14 ERA and a 1.06 WHIP. The number 2 pitcher, Carlos Carrasco, a 3.32 ERA and a 1.15 WHIP. Now, he only pitched 146.1 innings, so you want to see a little bit more out of him, but still pretty beast numbers. And then Danny Salazar is the number 3 with a 3.87 ERA in 137.1 innings. You'd like to see a few more innings out of him. But Trevor Bauer, a young guy, now, he did have a 4.26 ERA last season, which isn't great or anything, but it isn't terrible by any means. But he did pitch 190 innings for him, and that many innings out of a young guy is a good sign. He might be a guy that can pitch 200 innings for a 3-4 season stretch here soon. And then Josh Tomlin is the number 5 with a 4.40 ERA last season, but he did pitch 174 innings. Look at this, just 20 walks in 174 innings. Now, he doesn't strike out a lot of people, but he stays in his zone, and he's a solid back end of the rotation guy. And the last team is the Boston Red Sox. What they did this year to bring in Chris Sale only solidifies this rotation. They have him, I would guess, at the top of the rotation, although you could go with a couple of these other guys as well. But look, Chris Sale, a 3.34 ERA and a 1.04 WHIP last season in 226.2 innings. And David Price, a 3.99 ERA. That probably hope he can drop that at least to the mid-3s this season. But he did pitch 230 innings, had 228 Ks. Rick Porcello had a beast season last year, 223 innings pitched, a 3.15 ERA and a 1.01 WHIP. So either any one of these 3 guys you could start opening day and it wouldn't matter. Although I do believe Porcello's going to take a small step back this season at least. He's not a guy that's been an ace throughout his career or anything. That was really his best season last year. But Sale and Price are obviously aces, so the top 3 in this staff is looking good right now. And then you got Drew Pomeranz. Now, he had his breakout season last year with San Diego in 17 starts, had a 2.47 ERA and a 1.06 WHIP. But when he got traded over to Boston in 13 starts, he only had a 4.59 ERA and a 1.37 WHIP. Although going from San Diego to Boston is tough, and he had that 4.59 ERA and 68 2/3 innings pitched for Boston. They're hoping he can get somewhere back close to those numbers he had with San Diego last year. But he's always been a guy that has a pretty solid strikeout rate. And he had some walk problems in the past. Last year it wasn't as bad until we went back to Boston. 24 walks in 68 and 2/3 innings is too much. So they're hoping he can get back to those San Diego numbers. But the last guy here, not a guy, again, a guy I think is going to take a step back this season, but you look last year, Stephen Wright, a 3.33 ERA and 156 and 2/3 innings pitched. Now, he's not a guy that strikes out a ton of people. His walk numbers are okay. They're not great by any means. He's not really that dominant by any means, but he had a great season last year, and hopefully he can keep those numbers going into this year.
I gotta say, I like Cleveland's staff, but that's just because I want Cleveland to win, and I hate the Red Sox.
I like both of those teams, to tell you the truth.
Although I hate, well, Alex Rodriguez is gone, so now I hate the Yankees, so screw them. So I want Boston
now
to
you
beat
hate
them.
the Yankees. I actually heard he might be their next manager.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that. We'll
You'd
see.
love him again.
Well, I would love him. I just don't know if they're actually going to do it. He didn't exactly leave in great terms. It wasn't horrible, but it weren't great either.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Once he retired or whatever it was, they did put him in some kind of position in their organization. I forget what position it was, but it seems like they do want to keep him involved in their organization for some reason.
Because the dude's a beast.
He's a drug dealer.
Well, he's a drug taker. I don't think he's a drug dealer.
It's not a dealer, I guess, but it's also not just a taker. He was like a recruiter.
Oh, yeah. Well, hey, he wanted to help everybody do good. He was just trying to share the joy with everybody else. That's all.
Share the love with everybody on his team and screw everybody
That's it.
else.
Yeah, hey, screw everybody. He gets some steroids. He made more money than they did. I don't care if people do steroids in any sports.
But we're going to do the NL pitching staffs next, hopefully here in a week or so.
Anything else for the fans?
No, that's about it, man.
Questions or comments, hit us up on Twitter at bet_the_spread. Hit me up on Twitter at betjimtowin. You can find all of our episodes on our Facebook page at facebook.com/betthespread. You can also find them here on YouTube at youtube.com/betthespread. Share the spread, be the spread, eat the spread, sleep the spread, whatever you want to do, just do it.